did this research with one of the Tier 2 Canada Research Chair neuroimmunologist, Dr. Craig Moore. So the work was done through his lab. So basically the whole idea was that we know that, basically MS is really thought of traditionally as a T-cell-mediated disorder. But over the last, say 10, 15 years even, the role of B-cell therapy has really elucidated the fact that, B-cells play a major role in the pathogenesis of both the inflammatory and the neurodegenerative components of the disease. So what we were interested in looking at was how disease-modifying therapies affected both all these immune cell subsets, T cells, B cells, even things like in the innate immune system, such as natural killer cells, and how those levels were related to neurofilament light. And just for a bit of background, I'm sure most people here know, but neurofilament light has really come up as a huge frontrunner for a potential biomarker to measure prognostic indications and DMT responsiveness in MS and all subtypes. So we can measure that in the CSF and more recently as well, very accurately in the serum. So we wanted to kind of tie all those things together. How is CSF neurofilament light related to the T cells, B cells, and whatnot in the CSF? And overall, essentially what we found, now again, it's a small study, so it's kind of a proof of concept, and we're hoping to recruit more people over time. But essentially, we proved that CD8 positive cytotoxic T cells, CD4 positive T cells as well, in addition to CD19 positive B cells, basically all those levels return near to baseline of non-inflammatory controls when given disease-modifying therapy of any kind, and that these levels are very highly correlated with the CSF neurofilament light chain levels that we see. So we see that they're highly correlated and that they both all kind of dampen down in response to DMT. We group people, basically there was, our interventional group was anyone who's diagnosed with relapsing-remitting multiple sclerosis on any DMT. We had to do that because, again, we're a smaller university. We don't have as many patients to be able to group them by high efficacy, moderate, and low. But basically anybody that was on any DMT showed these results. And we had 3 different control groups as well. So we had our non-inflammatory controls that were CNS disease. We also had inflammatory controls where they had, other neuroinflammatory disorders that were inflammatory, but just not MS. And then we had our healthy controls as well. So we did that to make sure that we elucidated the specific neuroinflammatory measures in MS. Overall, essentially I'll give you some of the kind of specific results. What we did find is that, as I mentioned, CD4 positive and CD8 positive T cells we found that those were elevated in our cohort in patients who were untreated relapsing remitting. So we have our untreated relapsing remitting, our treated on any DMT, and then the other 2 controls being the non-inflammatory neurological disease and the inflammatory. So the CD4 and CD8 were elevated in the untreated, and that basically what we then see is that those levels will normalize with any DMT. So most of the patients that we had in this cohort, it was a combination. It could have been teriflunomide, fingolimod, dimethylfumarate, and then a couple on the higher efficacy medications like our B-cell depleting Ocrevus or Kesimpta. And then we also demonstrated that the level of CD19 positive B-cells and CD56 natural killer cells, those were also elevated, but those normalized with DMT. So we thought that was interesting as well because natural killer cells are part of the innate immune system. So there was also a bit of a role there where it wasn't typically thought to impact the innate immune system, it was more adaptive, but we do see some innate immunity being affected there as well. And the natural killer cells could compound the effect, the pro-inflammatory cytokine response that we see in the adaptive immune system. So that was interesting. And as well, of course, the CD19 positive B cells and the natural killer cells were positively correlated with the CSF NfL, like I said. So as we saw the levels of B cells and the level of these natural killer cells rise, we saw the CSF NfL come up. So they're very positively associated. And then lastly, what we found is that the leukocytes, as well as the B cells and the CSF NfL were all correlated negatively with the number of months since the most recent relapse. So essentially, the further away you were from an actual clinical relapse, then the lower the levels of all these. So we can kind of time associate that. All these go up with the relapse, disease activity, neural inflammation, everything rises, and then everything goes down as we move away or as we institute treatment.